This is another personal story from the first edition, 1939, uh, Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book. This personal story is entitled The Fearful One, written by Archie Trowbridge, Akron, Ohio. When I was 21, I was taken suddenly and violently ill and was ill for 7 years. As a result of this illness, I was left with a poorish nervous system and a curious phobia. As this has a large place in my story, I'll try to explain it clearly. After I had been ill some months, I grew strong enough to get out of the doors a little each day, but I found I couldn't get farther than the nearest corner without becoming totally panic-stricken. As soon as I had turned back home, the panic would vanish. I gradually overcame this particular phase of the trouble by settling myself longer distances to walk each day. Similarly, I learned later to take short streetcar rides, then longer ones, and so forth until I appeared to be doing most of the things other people do daily. But the things I did not have to do each day, or at least frequently, remained unconquered and a source of great but secret embarrassment to me. So I went on for years, planning always to sidestep the things I was afraid of, but concealing my fear from everyone. Those years of illness were not all total invalidism. I made a good living part of the time, but was continually falling down and having to get up and start over again. The whole process was living part of the time, but was continually falling down and having to get up and start over again. The whole process gave me a licked feeling, especially when towards the end of my 20s, I had to give up the presidency of a small company, which was just turning the corner to be real success. Shortly after this, I was successfully operated on and became a physically well man, but the surgeon did not remove the phobia. That remained with me. During the period of my illness, I was not especially interested in liquor. I was not a teetotaler, but I was just a social drinker. However, when I was about 30, my mother died. I went to pieces as I became very dependent on my parents through my illness. When I began to get on my feet again, I discovered that whiskey was a fine relief from the terrific nervous headaches I had developed. Long after the headaches were gone, however, I kept discovering other difficulties for which whiskey was a grand cure. During the ensuing 10 years, I once, by sheer willpower, remained dry for 5 weeks. I had many business opportunities during those 10 years, which, although I tried to keep them in my grasp, slipped through my fingers. A lovely wife came and went. She tried her best, and our baby's birth put me on my mettle for all of 6 months, but after that, worse and more of it. When my wife finally took the baby and left, did I square my shoulders and go to work to prove to her and to the world that I was a man? I did not. I stayed drunk for a solid month. The next 2 months were simply a drawn-out process of less and less work and more liquor. They ended eventually at the home of a very dear friend whose family were out of town. I'd been politely but firmly kicked out of the house where I'd been boarding, and although I seemed to be able to find money to buy drinks with, I couldn't find enough to pay advance room rent anywhere. One night, sure my number was up, I chucked my pride and told this friend a good deal of my situation. He was a man of considerable means, and he might have done what many men would have in such a case. He might have handed me $50 and said I ought to pull myself together and make a new start. I've thanked God more than once that was just what he did not do. Instead, he took me out, bought me 3 more drinks, put me to bed, and yanked me bodily out of town the next noon to a city 200 miles away and into the arms of one of the most extraordinary bunch of men in the United States. Here, while in the hospital, men with clear eyes and happy faces came to see me and told me the story of their lives. Some of these were hard to believe, but I Didn't take but it didn't take a lot of brain work to see that they had something I could use, and it was so simple. The sum and substance of it seemed to be that I would turn to God. It was very probably that He could do a better job with my life than I had. When I got out of the hospital, I was invited to stay in the home of one of the fellows. Here I found myself suddenly and uncontrollably seized with the old panic. I was in a strange house in a strange city, and fear gripped me. I shut myself up in my room. I couldn't sit down. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't lie down. Couldn't even leave because I had nowhere to go and no money to take me. Any attempt at reasoning accomplished nothing. Suddenly, in this maelstrom, I grasped at a straw. Maybe God would help me. Just maybe, mind you. I was willing to give Him a chance, but with considerable doubt. I got down on my knees, something I hadn't done in 30 years. I asked Him if He would let me hand over all these fears and this panic to Him. I laid down on the bed and went to sleep like a baby. An hour later, I awoke to a new world. I could scarcely credit my senses, but that terrible phobia which had wrecked my life for 18 years was gone, utterly gone. And in its place was a power and fearlessness which is a bit hard to get accustomed to. All that happened nearly 8 years ago. In those 6 months, a new life has opened before me. It isn't that I've been cured of an ordinarily incurable disease. I've found a joy in living that has nothing to do with money or material success. I know that incomparable happiness that comes with helping some other fellow get straightened out. Don't get me wrong, we're not a bunch of angels. None of us has any notion of becoming such, but we know that we can never go completely back to old ways because we're traveling upward through service to others and in trying to be honest, decent, and loving toward the world. Instead of sliding and slipping around in a life of drinking, cheating, lying, and doing what we like. Join me in the Lord's Prayer, please. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and forever. Amen and amen.